I'm confused.
All right.
We could start with public comment while we're waiting for him.
Matt, you got anything?
Ready to have my 6th grandchild?
I think we knew that before.
Hmm?
Maybe we knew about the 5th one last time. I
Yeah, it was a
lost
boy.
track. Uh-huh.
Okay.
This,
Wow.
this
back to
one's
back.
still in budding or whatever they say.
Wow. Great time to be alive.
Yeah. Waiting on my 3rd daughter to have one.
Recording.
We all set?
Evolution of life continues this sucker.
All right, I'm gonna call the Grafton Planning Commission regularly scheduled meeting to order. We have an agenda here, and actually, I might recommend I guess I can go to the end actually, and then it doesn't matter because then you can get out of here. I would recommend we add executive session to this after Roman numeral 8 to talk about personnel issues. All right, if we could do that.
Sure.
And with that, I'd like a motion to accept as amended.
So moved.
We have minutes from the December meeting, but there's only 3 of us here, and so we're gonna postpone approving those until Matt's here either later today or at the next meeting, so we're gonna delay that. Open it up for public comment. Since we don't have a public, we're gonna move on. Correspondence communications, I have none, I don't know.
There was none in the office. There has been none.
I guess make sure we have in the minute, well, I guess it can come down below, but under correspondence, I got an email from a select boardman that said the town plan was approved yesterday, so at some point in the minutes, we oughta.
Oh, did you not know that?
No. You mean approved?
Yes.
By the
The town.
voters of the town the Australian ballot, yesterday was the vote 95-66.
Correct.
It was not unanimous, which is unfortunate.
Oh, that's okay. It's approved.
It is
Yes and
approved.
no, we were discussing unofficially before you got here, how we could do some PR to address the concerns of the people who voted against it.
Do we know their concerns?
A little bit, I think.
Part of it, that's a 2-part question, because, the survey or some way to, we can talk about that, I agree completely.
But it is a celebratory moment and we should all bask in the moment.
Particularly Eric.
Next,
How many years? Yeah,
It's been about 10 years now.
I was gonna say.
Which really pulls the trigger on several things. There is money in the budget, and I don't want to jump all over the thing for, I forgot, $400-$500 for that municipal planning grant. And the idea is we have to put up 10% of it, and that's why we put it in there, that I think we can get up to $4,000 grant if, for example, the survey is what we want to do or something else. I don't know the protocol, just because it got voted on yesterday, we're not done yet. It's still got to be,
Regional conformity and all that, yeah.
it's got to go to the Wyndham Regional Commission. They're the last step, they approve it, is that correct?
Well, we have a town plan now,
Yes.
Okay.
So we've
but,
qualified.
and approved by WRC is the next step.
Right.
But we don't have to have their approval. Having their approval does facilitate the grant process that we're talking about. Since you had communications with staff people and they were pretty well on board with the way we wrote it, I would anticipate their approval. But that process is gonna take probably 3 months at the minimum.
Yeah, according to 2 months is what Bill told me, it's just because, depends on when it gets on the agenda, it's like the first Tuesday or whatever every month is when they look at it, and so, I don't know exactly.
They have to pull willing people together to be a review board of commissioners. They have to look at it, and then once they're done with that process, which includes a hearing back here in Grafton usually, they hold a hearing on it. Then it goes to a vote of the whole commission. So 3 months is like it's a hair scramble. This is the fastest you're gonna see it from them, probably.
And what is the exact start date of this? When they approve it or yesterday?
Yesterday is when we have an official town plan.
Okay, because it's what, it's a 8-year?
Yeah.
So is that 8 years started yesterday, or 3 months from now is what I'm wondering?
I think it's yesterday.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Pretty sure.
Either way, who's in charge of sending it to them?
I can take and make sure they get it. Again, Bill and I have, Bill Bennett, not Bill Bennett.
Usually the select board sends it.
Oh, is that their responsibility?
Actually, yeah, you're right. Officially, it is a select board.
The select board didn't approve it, the voters had final approval authority, but I guess it still is
This is the select board.
Yeah.
So Bill will be the conveyor of it.
And, yeah, it's a good thing, we will likely need to go the municipal planning grant route because the request for $2,000 from the plan commission, the additional $2,000 for the next year's budget did not pass
Oh, okay.
the select board scrub of the
Oh, okay.
budget
Well, I haven't
request.
heard that one.
Yeah, so,
Okay, all right. So do we have some final numbers, if approved, what they are then, for
yeah,
next year?
yeah, I'll accept that $2,000, which my understanding was, based on the info you provided, that was specifically to support the community planning survey that we hope to execute. That was the recommended consultant retention.
I think so,
Okay.
yeah.
And, I explained that, and then I pitched, the option of possibly breaking that down over the next 4 years, just 500 a year, if that would be more palatable. Still did not fly.
And what was the objection?
It's just a very tight budget. We've had unforecasted increases in other places. The cost for our computer security, for example, have more than doubled.
So we
things
could
have-
still stand up at town meeting and make a motion?
That's an option too. Also, another organization in town did make a request, not as much as for $500, the librarian and the board, the head of the board, both showed up at the budget meeting, and that may have given it some extra weight. And again, it was a smaller amount, so it was more palatable, easier on the select board to pass.
That was-
But the 2,000 was
That was more than frustrating. I found those dates out a couple days before, and they were at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
I was like, some of us work for a living. That was a
But
tough
they didn't
one.
object to the job, they just objected to the money. So if we got the money somewhere else, they would
Oh, yeah.
support the job.
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
yes. It's just a tight budget, everything's going up, salt sand trucks, computers, everything, alarms, everything. And so we're trying to, keep things as
Well, let's get back on this, and we're actually going to come
Okay.
back and talk more in depth about town plan and survey and such later, and then we can maybe get a better idea of what we do and don't want to do. Very quickly, updates, Wyndham Regional Commission, anything to throw at us?
Energy Committee will be meeting tomorrow night. I'll be going to that.
DRB, you guys were getting out.
Oh, yeah, we had one hearing today that we opened for a minor subdivision, the estate of Iva Fisher, which is continued until February 4th, another 2 weeks pending proper notification of all interested parties. Then we have another one upcoming in February, mid-February, I anticipate, Hayden Lake subdivision minor. And there may be one other coming. Chuck, are you aware of, was there anything else in the queue as far as subdivisions that you're aware of?
And Hayden Lake's not even a subdivision, it's just work within a floodplain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nothing controversial or contentious, or?
No.
Where's the work? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know, actually, do you know?
I don't, I haven't seen
It's got that big swamp that Trail number 8 or whatever I went through. I wonder if it's up in there.
Floodplain.
Oh, floodplain, he said. I was thinking of wetlands. Up
But
there?
when I find out, I'll let you know, Eric.
All right, well, you're on board Village Wastewater.
Okay, we are still focusing on educating ourselves, getting smart on what the developments have been in technology since we've contracted for the last 2 studies with Otter Creek and Ty and Bond. The most recent one was, about 12 years ago. So we want to educate ourselves with subject matter experts as to state-of-the-art technology for wastewater, and then concurrent with that, we're going to be doing, we talked about reaching out to the public at large for educating people within the village pumping district who may not know, the effect of a garbage disposal on their septic system, or other things that coming from municipalities that have water and wastewater, things that don't work as well with a private well and septic system, especially in a congested area. Second homeowners and people moving in from municipalities that have that infrastructure. We want to educate them, and then as we move on, also educate the public on the risks of not having municipal systems, the risk to property value should there be a catastrophic event, the risk to the economic development, the potential for stagnation. We've seen two of our largest employers in town move out of town because we don't have the infrastructure to support Grafton cheese, and Blake Hill specifically have had to relocate elsewhere to expand because we don't have that infrastructure. And so these are things that we need to make sure are part of the information and education that we get out to the public as we present the options for either water and or wastewater within the village.
Any kind of timeline or plan, like, as
No,
in-
we don't have a fixed timeline.
Okay, just keep moving forward until you're ready to take some kind of vote, I assume would be.
Yeah,
By
and
someone.
yes, and it will be ultimately up to the public to vote any expenditure of funds on such a system. And, in the past, it hasn't gotten very far because the price tag is prohibitive.
My perception is the two choices are either only the village pays for it, which would be
And that's an option.
unbelievably expensive, so they're not thrilled with that, or the whole town pays. And there's town people who are like, well, I don't live there, why am I
And
paying?
you've got
You know,
90%
so-
plus of the town that doesn't live in the district that
yeah.
is not gonna be as inclined. And that's why the education is an important part. We risk, property values collapsing in the village. If there is a catastrophic event, businesses closing down, no businesses coming into town. Even if, we maintain the status quo with, through the village pumping ordinance and good habits, we have no issues. We're still limited as far as economic growth and development.
It's gonna be a tough sell, that.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
I guess
You
the-
guys been tracking
we're-
Saxon's River?
Have we been what?
Tracking Saxon's River, they had that
No.
major upgrade of their system, effectively rebuilding their entire, sewer.
For the
Okay.
village.
Yeah, and
That's
I,
worth looking at.
yeah, and I don't fully understand it, but I get it on the periphery, where somebody's trying to downzone, they talk to me and they talk about, the economics now of, with this issuance of a bond and paying off the debt, and it really falling on a small consumer base, and what that means for individuals whose, their rates have tripled, quadrupled. And there's no indication that that's gonna slow down, that in fact. it might
20-year
actually-
bond kind of thing, and
Yeah, so, and I have just very vague understanding that it's.
But they have water and wastewater in Saxon's River?
Yeah, but the main issue was the wastewater plant,
And
because
new
of meeting
plant.
standards, and so it sounds like they basically rebuilt the whole thing.
how long ago?
Last year.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't even aware of it, so. And that's part of your research is all of that. You're nowhere near looking at finances yet, that's way down the road you're trying to figure out.
Right, and then, that would, depend on technology that's
Right.
available. And then, again, ultimately, it's the taxpayer, the voter, that is gonna decide.
Is, maybe you don't wanna show your hand, maybe your opinion, or the group, leaning more towards water, towards wastewater, a hybrid of a little of each?
We're we're letting the facts guide us. We're
You're not starting
taking a
already to say
position.
this one looks better, I mean, it's not.
Oh, well,
Not an
common,
emotional thing, but just what you've seen so far, does one,
common knowledge, just for most people, you ask most homeowners, you know,
Mhm.
people want their well water. They could care where their crap goes. You know?
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and if it can go away from their well, so much the better.
But they're
So-
like the well water, so at least.
So I assume that's gonna be the prevailing sentiment if there's a choice. I mean, no one is anxious to, you know, taste the municipal water, you know, when they've been on well water.
Well, as you say, the facts should
Even-
dictate a story.
Right, but we're not taking position, the facts are gonna
Right.
guide us. But that, most people though, if given a choice, they would choose wastewater
Never thought
over,
about it, but
over
now that you say that.
water, cause even my kid who puts ketchup on everything can taste the difference between Bellows Falls water and Grafton water.
Mhm.
So,
Fair enough.
no offense. to-
Don't knock BF Cola. We like BF Cola.
All right,
I have a well too.
we'll switch gears, but keep the same presenter, select board, what do you got to present?
Well, just so people are aware, it's public, now, there was an article in Vermont Digger, about,
Cambridge
the
Port?
Cambridge Port, what was, we call the CIC building, a chemical mixing company in there that has been
Pretty alarming.
operating, yes. So that is the most concerning item for the select board at the time is.
Want to give an
making sure-
update? They're shut down for now, is that what I read?
The fire chief has, and health officer have the authority to shut it down. We're trying to get the state agencies to perform their oversight. There's correspondence going up to the state from the select board to the highest levels to try and get the attention we need to make sure that the things that need to be done are being done, that the materials that are in there are removed properly and safely through is it Clean Harbors or Safe Harbors?
Clean Harbors.
Clean Harbors, as opposed to being hauled away in a U-Haul to, you know, as was mentioned.
So it's not an intention for them to just get an inspection and say, look, we're actually following code, we just forgot to do some paperwork,
I
and
don't
we'll
see-
back up to speed?
I don't see
No.
that happening, no.
Give a quick answer to that
It
one.
needs to be,
Yeah, why don't you just read the Vermont Digger?
Pretty good article, okay.
I had to work with the fire marshals today, and they brought it up. They put a cease and desist order on that business. Basically, you can't mix chemical again until we figure this out. And the long-term goal is, yeah, just to relocate it to someplace more suitable.
Well,
Like a van in a back
follow
alley?
federal regulations, there is that.
Yeah, the operation has been completely under the radar.
Standalone company there, or part of a bigger corporation? or-
Standalone.
doesn't even have a website, it's off the radar.
Okay. Anything else? Is that?
No, that's the hot item. And then we are getting into, close to town meeting, so, deadlines for petitions and coming up, if anyone wants to run for any office.
Yeah, that deadline's next week, not much past that.
17th.
Oh, that's Friday, I think.
It's coming up.
All right.
Well, going back to our town plan, I believe the select board actually has to request the WRC to review, to approve. So that would be perhaps as our emissary, Chris could.
Well, I actually had the PDF open that had all those steps,
Yeah.
and so it's actually open back in my, at my house, so I'll look that up, and whatever it says, I'll make sure, and again, I'll correspond directly with Bill and Joe together at the same time to make sure everything's going right. So,
Okay.
all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if there's nothing else under that, we'll actually switch officially to the town plan under unfinished business. You notice when I put this together, I have next steps, plan for updating, editing, improving the plan, including a timeline. And I put down, I've talked about it before, some kind of chapter design template. I guess I'll start with some comments and I go back to the survey and we'll talk about that or something. We worked for, and I'll use the word years, to split hairs to try to find consensus. You know, and even through much of the hearings, there was, in my opinion, a little bit more of a pull from, if you want to say one side of our town from the other, And then at this informational meeting, like the whole other side of the town showed up and nobody showed up from the other side. It was kind of a strange dynamic to say the least. And boy, they had questions and concerns and, it was all about the map and it was land use and, where did the coloring come from and how come mine's white, yours is red, yours is blue, kinds of things. And so I apologize to the camera and everybody else. I did not know that I was going to be the center of attention at that. I thought I was just going to sit there silently and it was going to be an informational meeting. We're going to go on. So I did not have anything prepared. So a lot of it was off the cuff.
Oh, was that recorded? Did you just say there was a camera that day?
Was there a camera that
No,
one?
I thought that's what you said.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
No, yeah.
Because somebody else told me something like, Dave doesn't think we need a town plan anymore. I'm like, I'm very sure that's not what he said.
I might have said that. I mean, there's a lot to having and not having. And I guess that will lead to right where I want to go, which is take a breath, regroup, and I got a couple of handouts. Let's go with that. I did talk to Bill. This is a print from my plan that I did when they were working on it. Bill is going to print 6 copies of the official final town plan, one for everybody at this table. So we have an official town plan. You can throw half of your bag out now, I think. Right? So that's that piece. The next thing, and this is maybe my reaction to the questions that came up, and again, I'm maybe overreacting, but what is the purpose of town plan? Maybe that's where Dave Culver says we don't need a town plan. Well, not every town has a plan.
Right.
And so what I did was go back and try to answer for myself, why do we need a town plan? What you've got here, I would like you to file somewhere as a reminder cheat sheet, and it's from 2 different sources. You can take a minute and read it. The first 2/3 of it is from the Municipal Planning Guide, and I put the website there from the state level. And I took that 20-page document and I cut and pasted the big important points, starting with you need a plan, it's necessary to, and there's your reason we can't forget that. The next section is can, because everybody says, oh, it's got to be a visionary statement. Actually, I think it should be, but there's no rule that says it has to be. And so let's be clear what the town plan is and what it's not. That's what I'm throwing in there. I threw in the state planning goals there, and I did not print all 10 of the criterion that all Act 250 reviews go through, but there are 10, and I printed the 10 one, and that's all I could find is what it says there is in the conformance with local or regional plans that I didn't know, is if our plan was not approved, the regional plan would basically be the one that they look at if something was Act 250 in our town. All right, just a minor point, but I wanted to throw that in there, that's what it says. I will go on to say there was a reality I was not aware of as I read more into this, and what it said, and I want to make sure I get this right because I don't have it in front of me, was basically, yeah, your town plan, if you have one, then becomes a standing point for Act 250, but if you're a tiny little town, you probably don't have the clerical and resources necessary to bother with it, because you need somebody up in Montpelier a lot, and just that's a resource that most small towns don't have. So the fact that we have a plan now and we do have standing is great. They talked a little bit in a couple of documents I read about. The reality is, you need some money and some resources, which, who is it with Lowell Lake? They're probably using their resources. If you know, there's an issue with Lowell Lake, and that's Londonderry.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's Act 250 and so forth. So anyways, the other thing, in the last section, starting on the 3rd page, is required elements of the town plan. There's a lot there, and I apologize, but that is from the Wyndham Regional Commission's 20-page rubric that we've been using to verify that our plan is still good. So those are the things that they say we need. So as we start to edit this plan, and I always kind of joke about when Joe got kind of upset with the new plan and said, let's just get rid of the word fluvial everywhere. It's a silly word, get rid of the word fluvial. And this was one of the public hearings, and Bill went through and said, oh, the notes say from the Wyndham Regional, we can't take fluvial out. Okay, that's kind of what this is for, to make sure we have the right stuff in as we start making our edits. So that's that piece for your information. The next one is maybe an introduction to where I want to go. You know, you just had a review board, and I got hit by several people saying, you guys are going to meet and change that map tonight, right? Yeah. Like, I don't want to have them think that we're going to take 10 years, but I don't think we're going to get that done and then do nothing else. I sit at that meeting, and unless we'll do what you guys as a group want, I would love to set a goal about a year from now, have the amendment process go through. That over the next 12 months, and this is a starting point, this next handout, to review it. And if we come to review, and a year from now we say, you know what, we found nothing we want to change, so be it. But we got to look at it, I think, now that the fire is out from underneath our feet. This is an extended table of contents from our plan. The one that's in the front of the book has only the chapter level and one level below it. I went through and added all the subcategories to give a more complete sense of the way this is laid out. And I would like to talk about tonight, to start with, the idea that I've heard from multiple people, and again, it wasn't official because they weren't here, but I've heard it a lot, that our document is not readable. And I am not an author, but one way to, I think, clean that up is make every chapter, I'm not an author, I'll use the word parallel. That there's some kind of flow, that every chapter has 1, 2, 3, and boom. The other thing that I want to point out there, you'll notice under each chapter, they end with goals, policies, and recommendations. The numbers following are the numbers of goals, the numbers of policies, and the numbers of recommendations. And I've talked about it before, that's the thing I'd like to work on, is to really, really reduce the goals to the point that they are at least somewhat realistic. You know, you look and you got 4 goals here, and you got 5 goals there, and you got 2 and 3, and you start adding them all up, and there's a ton of goals down there. You know, it's policies. When I was on a school board, we had a total of 36 policies that ran the entire school board. I have just under housing 34 policies that we recommend we implement. That seems like a bit much.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to put some color to what we had, so we can step back and say, where do we go with this? And again, if the answer is nothing, so be it, but it gives a better sense of what we've got. So, any questions at this point and comments? I'll take a breath because I've been talking for a while.
I think your idea to minimize the goals, what was that chapter? I ended up redoing like 4 times, the chapter 12 or whatever it is. There was way too many, like, because you would have to link them all, and you get the sense of like, oh, we're in trouble here, because there's too many of them.
Mm-hmm.
More than most towns, you know, like, we just would just add that attitude, add it in, it can't hurt to add it in. It was very weighty.
And there are, unfortunately, 2 types of goals that we need to include. One are the goals that the town wants, and the other are the goals that are required if we want to have the amendment approved at the next level up. You know,
We saw that in energy.
That's the one I was thinking of. They told us what the 4 goals were. Well, I would not recommend that we drop that to 3 goals, whether you like the 4 or not. It is a good example of that.
But it was natural resources or something, we were connecting like 24 recommendations to various state goals, and it just was a time sink.
And I guess tonight, the one thing I would like to do is to, from you, give me a definition of what those words mean. And I'll tell you right now, I went to Webster's dictionary. A goal is the end towards which efforts is directed. There's their definition. I don't have a problem with that. But what are the policies? You and I had a discussion one day, and your vision or view of what a policy was different than mine. They put it down, a definite course or method of action selected from all alternatives in the light of given conditions. That sounds like how you're going to meet your goal kind of statement. Is that what a policy is to you guys?
Read that again?
It's got a bunch here, I took the first two. A definite course or method of action selected from among alternatives and in light of given conditions to guide and determine present and future decisions. A high overall plan embracing the general goals, accepting procedures, especially of a governing body. I will say that the Wyndham Regional, and I didn't bring a copy of it, the Wyndham Regional Plan has what I think sound more like policies that I'm used to. They have recommended policies and they're written in the terminology in the way I've normally seen policies through my experience on the education board. So, and then you got recommendations. And if I knew what those three words mean, I'd be more than willing to start by going to the end of every chapter and moving stuff around into where they belong. Because right now, we've got goals that look like recommendations, and we have recommendations that sound like policies, and I think just rearranging them will eliminate some duplicity and help clarify that. So,
Well, goal would be the end state, you know, what you're after. And the policies are what are gonna get you, the methods, the practices that are gonna get you there.
That's more
no.
procedures.
I would say that the policies are more of a strategy. And the recommendations are actually the real tactics to get there.
see, you and I went to the same school, because those are the terminology I totally get and understand, is goals, strategies, and tactics. Because that's, in the management world, there are some very definite, that's a model of,
Whereas if this board said it's our policy to grant preferred status to any energy provider, renewable energy that wants to situate themselves, you know, obviously the state gravel pits, but for us, prime ag land, as long as it can work around, you know, that Joe taxpayer knows that that's a policy. If I present a proposal to the town, they will support that based on the policy. They have to support it.
but see, even that, again, policy to me is a powerful word. Does the select board have a policy manual? I know the school board does. And it is law. I mean, it is the law that supports the state rules, and it's one of those silly books that it sits on a shelf until something goes wrong, and that's what every lawyer pulls down, is the policy manual. It's got that level of authority, if you will. Versus, I don't think our policies have any level of authority, is that, other than, you know, Act 250 deference and that kind of stuff.
I mean, we have the policies that we're required to have, like sexual harassment and.
That's what I, those are policies from where I come from. This seems to be a different definition than that.
Yes, different application.
All right. I guess we got to think about it some more. If we're going to go through this and have something a year from now, next month we need to do something. One logical approach is to choose a chapter. Check it off and say, good, we all looked at it, we edited it, we made no changes, we made changes.
Could we do something not controversial?
Because the problem is the first chapter is chapter 2, land use.
Yeah, how about we do something easy? Seriously, just to get, like, our feet wet.
And
We
feel
did
good
this in the
about it?
hospital. You know, like, we picked something easy first to do in compliance with some federal recommendations and policies. And so I think, what if we just skip to 3, just off the top of my head here? Well, that's tricky too.
Transportation,
Recreation?
Yeah, either of those.
transportation is one of our strongest chapters. It's a very good chapter.
Okay,
That's pretty cut and dry.
That
Yeah.
we start, you're talking about chapter 5, roads and transportation? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's a strong chapter. I don't think it's controversial.
And so we want to look at that as are things in the right category?
And it's a good starting point because it's not controversial. I will say, and I'm okay with that, we have a motion, do we have a second?
Can you repeat the motion?
And just say we start off with chapter 5 as something, or something similar that's less controversial, so we get kind of
No,
some
and is this,
practice.
are we just focusing on goal policy recommendation or the entire chapter rewrite, or what is the
Organization
scope?
of the chapter, right? To organize the chapter,
I
make sure
would,
it's, that the chapter organizations are consistent, to use it as a model.
and I like your idea because it's a clean, simple one. It's a good test without going into the deep water to see what kind of problems we're gonna run into without something controversial. So the answer is the entire chapter as a unit.
You know, each chapter is gonna be different. I mean, like with energy, there's gonna be so much that's stipulated that we don't have control of, that we have to.
See, and that's an interesting point.
There's not gonna be a one-size-fits-all rule necessarily.
You're right. I would not recommend we change a word in the energy chapter without a lot of thought, because that was not developed by us. If you know what I'm saying, that was lawyered by somebody else. That's a very good point. I'm not recommending the land use chapter, but again, I said it before, I'll say it again. We had a certain contingency consistently show up all the way through December, and it was amazing. I didn't see any of them at the informational meeting, or almost none of them. I mean, and then there was this other crew that were, more about, the general consensus, my perception was, by this group, we want the land use map to be one color for the whole town. We don't care what color. Make it critical, make it productive rural, but this idea, these arbitrary boundaries where mine's white and yours green, really had some people upset. Your perception?
It did.
Okay, I didn't realize that. I knew Al and I have talked about it before. I've tried to explain and convince him my point. He stuck to his guns. I respect that. I didn't know there was anybody else.
But that's where I don't know if you're here for the vote, it was 95 to 66. And a significant portion of the opposition centered on dissatisfaction with the land use map.
Yeah, I'm puzzled about why they didn't come to any meetings to try to suggest changing that beforehand, if they were so concerned, I have to
Was the
say.
idea it was zoning? Did they miss it?
Well, it's sort of arbitrary on its face, and that's where I think we get into trouble. And to come back to the motion that's on the table, I'm certainly willing to go along with what Valerie is proposing, just to get the structure of the process ironed out. But this land use is what has got the town really concerned, and I think we should be addressing it. And I'm not of a mind that the town has to be all one color, but where it is colored, it needs to have some really good depth and explanation for why we're doing it.
Consistency.
And
Why somebody else is doing it.
yeah, well, why Biofinder, for instance, is doing it, and I don't trust the macro approach of A&R. I want to have some. I want their input, but I also want some biologists and other input into this, because from my perspective, the map does not comport to what I see on the ground.
And we want the local voters to participate. That would have made it easier for us up front had we had that participation. So I think we should invite that.
Well, let's deal with this motion. Maybe this discussion's
Right.
part of that motion.
Yeah.
But I think we need to then immediately talk about
If we,
chapter 2 more than just, let's make it May. I think we gotta do more than just one meeting kind of approach.
my concern would be the scope, just that it doesn't become as consuming as the town plan was, where that was everything, pretty much, for what we did. We want to do other things.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So if we can keep it contained, then yes, I would support that.
And so if we say February for roads, we've got town meeting in March. We have some other stuff in March. One thought, and I think it was before the camera was rolling, that we discussed is, do we bring somebody down from A&R and do a very publicized public meeting to talk about everything from which Acts 171, Acts 77, whichever, the 171, thank you, and BioFinder and all that stuff.
But at the same time, we need the people, I mean, we've got foresters who live right here in town, make sure they're part of the discussion, and they don't come after the fact, you know, to deconstruct.
Right, so they could ask questions in real time, whenever people are here and have answers.
And we have some expertise in WRC, sort of between us and A&R.
Well, that's a good point. It would be nice to set it up at a time that people from both those groups.
Do a panel kind of mentality.
Yeah, don't you think?
So I've got foresters, local, I've got A&R, I got WRC, who else?
Hayden Lake, I know he's forester.
But he's the forester I thought of actually, but.
Al Sands too.
Well, that's why I didn't want just one.
And then just people who know, you know, every inch of the land, Rooney Gibbs and people who can, you know, speak to what's actually on the ground because they've hunted.
So if we were gonna
years.
have I've got a name for it, informational meeting, something of that nature, this room hopefully would be way too small for it. We could do it, a variety, we could do it at the home,
At the school.
if the school would be a logical place. We need an agenda, I mean, we can invite these people, but they're gonna ask why, what are we gonna talk about?
Yeah, it seems like we need to formulate it a little bit by maybe asking them, hey, what have they done in other places? And what kind of questions have they been asked in the past? You know what I mean? And so maybe we're looking at April rather than March so that we can, you know, really put together something that makes sense.
Right. And get past town meeting too.
Yeah.
Some of the local A&R folks, one comes to mind, I believe she lives in Chester, Marie Caduto. Has a
Yeah,
lot.
she's out of Springfield too.
Yeah, she's Springfield office.
Yeah, so she's local.
Nature Museum could be.
I think her expertise lies with watershed and anything else.
Well, that is an interesting idea about the Nature Museum, to see that they have somebody who they would recommend we include.
Yeah.
Just trying to be inclusive, and even the Wyndham Foundation, do they have somebody who they've consulted with in the past at all? I'm just thinking, you know.
Yes, that makes sense,
Roping in
yes.
constituencies here, you know?
Somebody to talk about critters.
Did people have a problem?
I think that would still be A&R, right?
It could be, or if there are local
Game wardens.
biologists,
Even?
perhaps, perhaps.
Because I remember going to one of these down in Putney like 10, 15 years ago that totally convinced me, oh, this is a weird way we're doing land use, and we could be doing this better, and oh, nobody ever, you know, I didn't know that. You know what I mean? It actually was eye-opening for me, so I'm thinking there will be other people who may be, with more information, less threatened by the map and more interesting about what's driving it, and or how we could change it to still address their concerns after having heard all this.
Right.
Who would be an expert on Act 171? Would that be somebody from the A&R, Wyndham Regional,
Wyndham
something
Regional, I
else?
think.
Wyndham Regional should be able to cover that.
What else drives the map from a legal point of view, not from what our opinions are? You got Act 171, what else? So that all the experts, or is that it, just the only thing driving it outside of what we want is Act 171?
Well, who's in charge of the floodplains?
That's not the map, that's a different map.
But the floodplains impacted the locations in the map, the lines on the map.
Yeah. Do we have any pro-development people on that list? I mean, there's the critter aspect, but if I had to guess why somebody might have an objection to the map, it would be a fear of the takings of my development potential.
Yeah.
That-
Al
Well,
Sands would be the
before.
first one that comes to mind. I mean, he's.
Okay, is that what he said?
Well,
So it was he was using that as an example, but he's
that's more
not,
complicated.
a developer per se.
But for credibility's sake.
Freedom of landowners' rights is, I think, the best way to describe Al.
Okay.
You know, that's, you know, he's an advocate of, zero zoning, zero land rules, etc. Joe, all of a sudden, I've never heard him talk so passionately, but at this informational meeting, he got pretty serious about, he doesn't like it, and I don't remember hearing it from him, so maybe he would be one. Well, he's not an expert, really. Yeah, he's not an
I think we need
expert.
somebody who is expertise.
Right, no, I agree. I wanna make sure he gets invited, because I got the sense that they feel a little snubbed that we don't invite them to
Well,
more
we
things.
should invite the
so,
select board, we
yeah.
should invite everybody.
Yeah, we should be having, I believe, one meeting a year, joint meeting.
Oh, really?
Isn't that required by law?
I don't think so.
The select board planning commission.
Sounds like a brilliant idea, but I've been
It's been
doing this
talked
4
about in the
years,
past.
it's the first time I've heard about that.
Let me see if that is an actual thing.
The only thing that comes close to that, I think the WRC is required to make an outreach at least once a year to us, as a town.
So in order to pull this together, we're gonna need a location, and the school by default is as good as anything. We're gonna need a date. The starting point would be to look at the town calendar, because there's dates that are obviously taken, select board meetings and so on and so forth. There's always gonna be conflict that somebody can't make one, but we need that. We need an agenda, exactly, I mean, I am more than willing to call everybody up on this list, but they're gonna say about what, and I better have an answer for that.
Well, so addressing land use controversies, right? That's what we wanna, that's really the issue.
And I think
In
one of the
Vermont,
first things I'd
not
like
just
to
in
do is
Grafton.
just call it the Wyndham Regional and talk about we wanna do this and what do they recommend, because we may not be the first ones to try something like this.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Um,
And maybe we wanna pre-meet with them even next month if somebody's willing to come from them, to talk with us a little bit. So that we're not unknowledgeable.
But if we could talk about this at town meeting, just make a pitch there, just so the voters and property owners.
Yeah.
Well, that makes a lot, and yeah, we're talking about a date after that anyways. That's a really good idea.
There are two individuals that I can think of in WRC that would be good to come. John Bennett, who has a historic and deep overview of all of these topics. And one of their newest members down there, Margot Gia, who happens to be in charge of the natural resources, and she was one of the people present at the wildlife connectivity briefing that was given by state people down in Newfoundland 2 months ago. So I think the two of them, either one or both, would be very good resources to town.
As you all know, I've worked a lot with John during this town plan, so my thought is give him a call first and just have a phone conversation about it.
I think she worked for the Nature Museum for
Oh, yeah.
some time.
Yeah.
Here in Grafton. So
Oh,
she
that's
had a
right,
connection.
yeah, I knew the name somewhere.
And more recently, she's been with,
Main Street Arts.
well, no, she's been working with something to do with watershed. Can't think of the organization right now. She was hired out of their employment. Connecticut River Watershed or something of that nature. She's the one that has provided the planting material for trying to make floodplains more secure. The only thing that comes to mind is Connecticut River Watershed. I think there's a different term. That's where she worked before she went to WRC.
Let me see the plan for a minute. One more point.
I can't, I just look at it like, oh man, we got one, this is awesome.
One more point that I want to mention from the informational meeting, and I own this. I own it. I'm the one that did this, so I want to revisit this. The general question I don't want to answer, but I want you to think about is, my process was start with the Wyndham Regional definitions. I cut and pasted the main paragraphs in. There are more to those definitions. They have 5 or 6 pages. I narrowed it down to 1. The only change I made was under resource lands. Let me find the definition to make sure I get it right. I added the sentence, what's critical? Resource lands can be actively worked and used, but future development should be weighed against the desire to preserve the area. I will repeat what I said at the informational meeting. I wrote that sentence, I added that sentence to add clarity because my understanding as I read resource lands from Wyndham Regionals was I felt that was too restrictive, and I wanted to make it clear this is not a preserve where you can't build. You just need to be aware of it. The question that came up that I didn't have an answer to is, it kept being asked of me at the informational meeting over and over again, who is weighing the development versus the nature? My intent was the landowner, but I didn't put that in there. And one change at some point is either to remove that sentence and then make it exactly the same as the Wyndham Regionals, or at least put into there, but future development by the landowner should be weighed by the landowner, something that clarifies who that is. That's my perspective only, but maybe the question I have is, do we want to continue for now, at least with the Wyndham Regional, because there was some people that did not like that we used the Wyndham Regional definitions. One question that was asked is, who else in our area of other towns use the Wyndham Regional? To the best of my knowledge, the answer is nobody.
That's right.
You go to Chester and they have their own definitions that I can't find anywhere else. I go over to the town of Wyndham, they have their own definitions that nobody else
But why would
uses.
they do that?
My logic was use the ladder system that
Right.
goes up, but I
Well,
don't
We
know.
supported you with that, just to be clear.
Well,
So
so
you're not
there
there
are
alone.
advantages when a state agency or some of that nature comes down to making a decision on what we're doing here, and then looks to the regional plan, and the terminology is the same.
That was part of my logic. But why does everybody use their own?
Some towns, it's just, historic inertia. The
Okay.
WRC stuff is, came on the scene about 10 years ago. It was pretty innovative at the time, still is.
And that is one of the pushbacks I got is what was wrong with the terminology on the old map?
Okay.
And maybe just that it's what's wrong with the way we always did it kind of mentality, I don't know.
And yeah, and sometimes you get concerned, you don't want to change things because you'll be like, oh, I'm gonna mess something up that I won't find out I messed up until 6 months from now. So we just keep the old language, that way it's there. And then the WRC stuff, when we originally talked about it, it was to legitimize the land use categories. It was, okay, these are people who are professional, who have given it a lot of thought, we can take advantage of that.
Another thing to add to that, the Wyndham Regional Commission does have a land use category called critical resource areas, but they have not, on their mapping, designated anything critical.
Have they pulled that out? Because the plan that I have, Bennett talked about pulling that out, but right now it's a subcategory of resource lands. They don't have it as a separate bullet.
Okay.
They say within resource lands there are critical resource lands. And that's another change I forgot to mention. We pulled ours out as a separate, for clarity is why I did it. And I will say it again, I think I go to the Lowell situation. The areas that we chose as critical resource, I am having second thoughts on. Al brought up the example of Turner Hill. Does that mean that the state or the Wyndham Foundation, whoever owns that, can't remodel that building? Well, when you read it real tight, it says no development should be done in critical resource lands. The answer to that is yes, that's what it says. Now, was not my intent, is to say they can't do that. I don't have an answer for that one. So. except for eliminate critical resource altogether and just, cover those areas green, and the idea that, those lands are owned by the state. It's not like they're gonna put up a big 10-story building there, I don't think. Maybe.
On the other hand, there are perhaps very limited areas within town that are not part of state ownership, where critical resource might be applied, where there's a pocket of some kind of critter or plant that needs to be protected, and I think that might be legitimate. I do.
What we've got now in that color are the Durand State Forest, the Rockingham Town Forest, the Putnam State Forest, the Village Park, Molly Beatty, Turner Hill, and the three streams that, up there, that are not the Three Sisters because they're male names.
I have a hard time with the brooks coming down out of Wyndham, and I don't think we have that kind of jurisdiction over the state lands, our own town lands. What if we want to do something to repair or add on or whatever to some structure or something within one of the, like a town park, or, I mean, are we gonna be restricted there? I think we need to have a reason for designating something critical.
Mm-hmm. Well, going to that section. Our key sites that are particularly sensitive should be given maximum consideration for protection. And though there is no specific zoning regulation or ordinance prohibiting development on private land, it is the express desire of the town that no development occurs on critical resource land. That is our definition.
It doesn't say no use, it says no development. Like,
Correct.
so those-
And I don't have a problem with that definition.
Mm-hmm.
I just have a problem with it being used as broadly as it was on that map.
So leave the definition, but shrink the pink, if you will. And I go back to the longer definition of resource lands. And again, it touched me. I take great pride in my name and who I am, and I try to do things honestly. And I got accused that I colored this map to benefit me. They say, look where the map ends, right on your property boundary. Well,
Oh.
yeah, that one hurt.
Sensitive, sorry.
Yeah, that
Which we
one.
all backed you up on all of this,
Well,
I point out.
Well, we didn't start with a color and then create a definition.
Right.
And this is why it's going to be important as we go to the community, we know what we want. Because, there's some people that said, I want all the same color. Great. If we use the word resource land, it defines things. Slopes over 25%. Well, do we make those resource, or do we say, no, we're not going to use that definition? You can't have it both ways. And that green that we see is colored based on the definition. Read the definition? It said large, now here's where you come in, large forest blocks. We call up the biofinder. It shows us where the large forest blocks are. That's what Jeff did, was simply overlay that large forest block. Now, if the definition says large forest block, doesn't that have to be green? Or do we say, no, we're going to come up with our own large forest block? We disagree with the state on this, and we're going to draw our own boundary of what we think large forest blocks are.
And I think that's legitimate.
It is. You think so?
Yeah.
I would have thought you'd say you can't do that.
I would use the state as a starting point, and then figure out, because the reason for the designation of those large forest blocks is to facilitate animal passage more than anything else. And if we can define where they can, where we can make the connections between them, we can perhaps make a much more targeted approach to keeping the critters happy with going from one place to another. without just blanketing the entire town, which is, if you look at the WRC's version of the large forest blocks, which I think you've got off in Finder.
They actually have more of a vague
Yeah,
drawing.
it's just like a blob.
Right, yes, it's very vague in theirs.
And it's not justified, because you don't need that much overlap and coverage to make the critters happy going from one place to another.
And it goes back to getting somebody from A&R that can give us some more
That's
expertise directives on that, so. I'm not sure what the answer is. You know, even when I read these, you know, what's the big difference between resource land and productive rural?
Thank you, I was gonna ask, why don't we switch to like productive rural?
And just make the whole thing white?
If you achieve a lot of the same objectives, I think, without some of the sensitivity.
Productive
What do you
rural
think?
includes forest lands, active agriculture lands, sand, gravel, mineral deposits, and high-value forest and agricultural soils that, when in productive use, contribute to the working landscape and have significant economic value.
That would be my preference, to see much of the town in productive rural and have splotches that represent the critical resource that I'm sure we have in town, but they're pretty small. In my
And eliminate the resource lands altogether, is that what I hear you saying?
Not necessarily, but productive rural land be the majority rather than the minority. And I want to see some between the forest blocks, however we want to, what category we want to put them into, the connection where we know animals will pass, and try to provide for that. Actually try to get public support for purchasing those avenues where they can
Or
go.
dreamer.
Well, that's the idea of buying easements along
Yeah.
streams.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's a legitimate public concern. It may take some education, but I think we have to figure out how to do a balance job. And the balance is between people being able to use their land the way they want, and at the same time living with all the flora and fauna that also occupy the land around here. It can't be all one way or the other. And right now, A&R and WRC would like us to be a forest preserve, and I just don't agree with that.
And we need to be able to explain to property owner here who has 50 wooded acres and the property owner here who has 50 wooded acres why they're not the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small distinction, but if you start with everything's productive rural, and then say, if there's an argument for elevating it, then you do it. But the default becomes productive rural.
I like that.
I could support that.
Okay. In that term and down that bend, and I'm reading more about what we define as, what the regional commission and us define as resource lands, and it goes back to that biofinder, identifies the high priority connectivity block and high priority interior forest block. That's their definition. And there is a map that has that exact layer. Do we change the definition? Do we not use the biofinder? Do we tweak it using an individual from A&R saying, well, you know, that's not exactly what we meant or something? Do you see the conflict of, I'm not sure how to resolve that?
Well, if we could invite, local people who have on the ground expertise in history to be another set of eyes to verify the accuracy, because I'm not convinced of the accuracy of some of the.
I was just thinking we need more expertise before we start actually wordsmithing, you know? But these are good brainstorming ideas, but I don't think we ought to make an actual vote or anything until we have a lot more expertise
And the
and
big-
input from the town and the experts.
And the big question, I don't know where the line is you said it earlier, we got the sense that the plan as written will probably be approved by the regional commission. How much of the map can we start to alter, go away from things like meeting Act 171 before they say, no, that's not an acceptable map?
That's a good question to
We
write down
could
right
work
there.
with them
Yes,
as we go.
it's a collaboration.
Yes.
Okay. This question needs to be asked. All right. All right, so we have a motion on the floor. Sorry about that.
So can we have a
It's a long
discussion?
discussion.
Yes, absolutely, but I don't want to forget your motion.
And I made Chris second it.
You okay with that? To have the theme of the transportation chapter with the goal at the next meeting to focus on that. There's gonna be a lot of distractions, because there's a lot of other things to do, but to review that and see if we can make that to the level that a year from now, we'd be proud to go to the town and say, we've edited it, here are the reasons, and this is what we wanna do. And there may be no changes.
As a template for
Yes,
change.
Okay.
yeah. Or for consistency. Not even change, but for consistency.
More discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So we're gonna focus on transportation, and we'll try and make sure we all have that and we know what we're talking about there. All right. Anything else under town plan for now? I'm gonna try to put this together in my head and write it so we have a summary of it. Okay. Village center designation, I have the word none next to that, but my motivation is gone right through the roof now that we have a town plan. My plan immediately getting that checklist out, getting hold of the Wyndham Regional, getting that stuff done, making sure they have the map done, even to the point that in the next several months, March, I may request a special meeting just to deal with Village Center from us and get that checked off. Can we do Village Center? No, Wyndham Regional has to approve before we can.
Yes.
Yes,
All right, so I will still move forward with it because we know that end is coming,
yes.
but I don't have to get it done as fast. All right, okay. Survey. What's your fiscal year from when to when? June, July?
June to July. June, it ends June 30th, begins July 1st.
We put in this fiscal year's budget money for a matching municipal planning grant. Not next year's. We might ask for it again next year. In fact, we might have asked for it with the idea that we may not have a plan, so we wanted that much money. But we might move forward with this, and I can check into that. We may not have time.
You're suggesting we can use money that is from this current year's budget, and we don't have to care about what select board voted on.
I didn't bring a budget with me, but I'm pretty sure we requested a line item specifically for a matching municipal grant, and I will look into that. I did some work, because I got off on a tangent, so I'm gonna show you where I got, and I'm not even sure where to go with this, but I'll tell you where I'm at. I don't even know how to explain what I've done. I wrote a whole survey.
Thank you.
Well, I didn't, but I did because I started playing with it, so I'm gonna pass out what I got, and then I'm not even sure where to begin on this. At the last meeting, and to honor what we said at the last meeting, we were gonna look at 3 different things and what do we wanna know. So my charge was to bring all of I got all these files, all these questions I brought together, anything dealing with land into one document to discuss what do we wanna know about land. Another one just about energy, and another one just about water, wastewater. So to do my homework, because I'm a good student, here is,
Oh, wait, where was economics and economic development in that?
for tonight, we didn't discuss talking about it, for the survey.
Right. So you're not proposing limiting the survey to those 3?
Well, no.
Okay.
We just said, we're all over the map at the last meeting, let's choose specific stuff, but I'm leading to something. I promised these, so that's land. These are the questions that I found. They're not in any order, they're not formatted. I just cut and pasted all sorts of stuff on wastewater, but I want to make sure you had this because you'll see where I'm going. I did the same thing with energy. Now we're going to face reality. If we put a survey together and put every one of these questions in, we're not going to get a single one back.
True.
All right? So I went to survey, and I started saying, what really matters? I cut out way too much, but what I have here is a draft of a survey, and it's only at the point to where the football game ended last night. It's not like, yeah, that's good, let's send it to him. Football game ended, I saved and shut it down, so it's a work in progress. I'd like to talk about this tonight a little bit. I'm about to pass it out, but you've got a bank of questions because Eric wants questions about transportation, and we got like 50 of them, but I only put a couple in. You know, and you want questions about water, wastewater, but we got 50 of them, and I only stuck a couple of them in, and I want to explain my logic and where I'm going.
We tell people in medicine you can only have 2 questions per topic.
And I'm closer to that. One of the things I decided that I want to recommend strongly, based on the work I've been working on this on, is to have 0 online option for this survey. I was the one advocating for that.
What?
I started, well, you'll see this because how do you do this online? First of all, to have it in 2 different formats, I think could be a real problem. Secondly, we only have a maximum of 600 people. You know, if we had 10,000 going online, it would make a lot more sense. And so this is a format. It's not done. I don't want to vote yet, do it. It's not that. It's where my head was at as of 12:37 last night before I went to bed. All right? You'll notice I got it divided into 4 sections. What I'd like to do is go over it. You'll notice it seems to me, if it's in paper, this will work. Now, this is like 7 pages, and I cut a lot of questions out. So tonight, I want you to go and say, wait a minute, that wastewater question's important, et cetera, et cetera. Section 1, this comes from Chuck's
Yep.
Rockingham thing.
That's got to recognize a lot of it.
Yep.
I liked that, the open-ended, 3 words, and then 2 more questions, there and there, what are the assets and challenges? Tell us what you think, put it in writing. The formatting's not there, there's a lot of work, I'm gonna kind of run through this. Section 2 is the factual questions. It doesn't have to be in this order, but you'll see those are all non-opinion questions. I started by eliminating any questions that I felt could be gotten from another resource. If there's a database out there already, then to ask them that, if we need to make this as tight as possible, it seemed like we shouldn't put it in there. I will say the negative to that is, we cannot do cross correlations. For example, I took out the salary, how much do you make per year? Well, we can get that information elsewhere, but we won't be able to dovetail other answers with this one and see what connections there are. So there's a win-lose on that. The 3rd section is all opinions, and you notice they're almost all grids. I'd like you to take a look at the questions on those. They're not in the best English format, but I was trying to eliminate a lot of duplication. There was a lot before when I was looking at this. Each one, you'll notice, has several blanks at the bottom of the grid.
Yeah.
That's for us tonight to say, hey Dave, you should put this one here, this one here. Also, you'll notice I want to have them end with, and I didn't do it on all of them, maybe they shouldn't be, but if you look at 27, for example, and several others after that, 30 has it, is other, with the idea that they can add their own and put something. Those are the kinds of things I couldn't figure out how to do elegantly on a web-style survey to have it say the same message. So those are some of the reasons I went with this. Part of my rationale also was, if we had a municipal grant, we would develop the survey and we spend the grant for boots on the ground to do a maximum implementation of data collection. I have no problem analyzing, collecting, organizing the data. I like data, that's fun for me. But if I'm talking hiring high school kids, that's what it takes, going door to door to get as many as possible. And then the last section is just one question. What did I miss? Tell us, give us any additional comments. So that's a starting point, maybe?
That's great, yeah.
I think the boots on the ground are absolutely necessary to make a representative survey. because
Could increase the number.
it will get the required cross-section of our population. Lots of people like to render their opinions and sit down and, I don't know, maybe they don't have a mortgage to pay and can work on surveys for a couple hours, and think about their answers in great detail and love to have their opinions known, and they'll fill out surveys. And other people who are
Working 12 hours
trying to
a
get
day.
the kids out the door and put the lunches together are gonna say, oh, nice you're doing that.
I'll put in the pile of other things I have to do.
You got to knock on doors and ask people's permission to occupy their time for a few minutes and get answers from the entire spectrum of people in town. And then you'll have something that is truly representative.
Well, here's a great test. There's nobody more committed to this stuff than we are. If I gave you the homework assignment between now and the next meeting, go home and do this, would you do it?
Sure,
Not because I want your answers,
yes.
but I want your emotional feedback. Like, I got bored by page 3. Good.
Yeah, no, I think that's a
You know
fair
what I mean?
plan.
It's
All right. So due by the next meeting?
Yeah,
Or
just
you
bring it
want
so we can
back
discuss
ahead
it.
and we want us
Okay.
to mail it back to you?
I think the next meeting's fine. If you want to send me emails like with comments and stuff, so I can do some pre-prep for the next meeting, I think that'd be fine. But I guess what I'd like tonight is to look at the content and are there, you know wastewater, there's not a lot of wastewater stuff in there. You know, there's a section that's uncomfortable that I don't like the way it is and I don't have a better solution, but I didn't pull it out. And it's, how satisfied are you with? And it lists, it doesn't list people, but we're a small town. You know, services from your town offices, your town road maintenance. Well, hopefully, I personally would say wonderful things about Tommy, but maybe not everybody would, but, you know, those kinds of things. So,
Are 26 and 29 kind of the same?
are they? Could be. Again, it was 12:30 last night.
Which ones are the same, sorry?
26 and 29?
Yes, 26 and 29, I've played a lot of time with.
There's
I started cutting all of 29 and putting it into that, but 26, oh, wait a minute.
There's two
Oh, no.
additional ones on the bottom of 26.
Oh, yeah, it was a mistake. I was trying to figure out if I could put, I am a believer that we need to ask these questions about the energy piece. You know, and that makes a nice little grouping, and then you got cell towers. That was a screw up, by the way. I was looking if I could put those into, like, 28 actually is what I played around with, but it didn't seem to fit, because 28 is really about economic development, business types, and that kind of thing. So yeah, that was just a screw up, and, you know, I started thinking, you can see on 26, I started brainstorming, and it didn't end at cell towers. I said, you know, what about somebody comes in and says they're gonna put a 500 house development up on top of a ridge? You know, is that okay? A commercial development, industrial development, et cetera. So, but, all right, so we gotta make a point of dealing with that. What should be in there that's not in there? Or is that it? That's all we should be asking? What should not be in there that is in there?
I think you're right, working through doing it ourselves is
Will
not
give
the
us a better
trigger,
idea.
yeah. So I think putting that to the side and saying, do this,
Okay.
send you back feedback if you have it, or review at the next meeting.
2 pieces of feedback. One is the emotional side, however you want to put that. Is it too long? If you all come back and say, boy, that went fast, well, that would give me the freedom to say, well, we can add another page if we think that's appropriate. But that length has got me very concerned. And then obviously the second part is that content piece is, you know, you really got to ask more about whatever the area is you want to worry about kind of thing.
Can we all just hit our stopwatch on our phone? So you hit your stopwatch, take your survey. 'Cause
Timing
usually
would be
orthodoxy
excellent.
suggests anything
Mhm.
past 5 to 7 minutes you won't do. So if you just move it aside, hit it, and then start taking your survey, and then see when you're done.
Don't need to know the second, but yeah, was this a 20-minute thing, a 5-minute thing, absolutely would be helpful.
But
But
no,
some of the ADD people aren't gonna do it all in one shot. They can come back.
And that's very true, yeah.
If we're administering it though, and sending a kid in there, yeah, they would be there for
Right.
5-10 minutes.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
it would take longer, because there'll be conversation then. So, wait, back up for a second though, on number 6, you say, what year did you acquire your Grafton residence? We just asked them if they even own their own home.
Well, and I didn't know how to do that one. Originally it said buy, but most of my family didn't buy their home. They just got it from, their grandfather or whatever, so they acquired it, they didn't buy it.
But some of the people are renting, is all I'm saying. So I'm saying, do we want to actually say, what year did you move into your home? But not
So
everybody lives there.
here's the circular problem that we need to answer, and tonight, if we can answer this one question, it would be fantastic.
Uh-huh.
Who is the survey for? Just taxpayers? Anybody that comes to visit? Second homeowners?
Right. And what about businesses? I remember them being really irked when they were left out of some survey, and I don't remember which one it was. Who got surveyed here and went to residents and it didn't go to business owners?
Matt mentioned that out in Rockingham, that he
Yeah.
was not being asked his opinion.
Yeah.
And he was
Yeah.
Yerky.
I'd like you to please look at question 4 and 8 together.
Well, so can we just add under 4, yeah, like besides other, can we just offer something like I own or work in a business in Grafton?
And there, would that be the third choice if they own a business in Grafton?
Well, it's a 4th choice. You had 3 other ones, right?
Right, but what's the third choice?
My primary residence is somewhere other. You have 3 questions after number 4.
Right, the other is the fourth one, but the
Right.
third one is if I own a business and I live in Rockingham, wouldn't they choose the third one? But I own a business in
No.
Grafton, no?
No, because you don't have to own property to have a business here.
They could be renting the property,
Yes.
yes. So how can
The
we,
guys with the antique store, the store itself,
see, I struggled with this
yeah.
piece because whatever that answer is gonna define who this survey is for.
Right. So I just, I was the one who said, oh, put it off, but I'm just looking at those 2 and I'm like, well, we need more choices regardless, because I think we want anybody who has a vested interest in Grafton succeeding as a town
Okay.
to weigh in here. So I think that includes, maybe it does include, I'm just visiting, but I visit regularly. You know what I mean? So
And we just gotta make sure
Put a
that-
stack of them in the library and just, we just know to weight them, by.
And it's another reason why I like doing handwritten, because then we can,
Yes, go back and look and see which answers match which ones.
it would be a task, but it'd be much better collection of data, I think. One of my concerns, and I'm not disagreeing with you, is many of these questions are based on you live here kinds of things.
Right,
We just gotta make it clear, it's only answer those that are pertinent to you kind of approach. One of the things that Chuck has advocated for is the young people. Well, they don't own a home here, they live with their mommy and daddy. Should they fill it out, and are they listed in this list?
right.
To solve number 6, you could say, what year did you become a Grafton resident?
But not everybody's gonna be a resident. So they're gonna be second homeowners, they're gonna be business people. Uh-huh. So I think you can say, what year did you develop a significant connection to Grafton?
Did you begin living here in Grafton? I don't know.
Create a
No,
relationship
some of
with
the,
Grafton.
what year did you begin living or working in Grafton? How about
Use
that?
the or.
Number 8, which statements best describe you, because perhaps more than one statement
Yeah.
applies.
Sure. That's, yeah.
Is it possible?
Sure.
It's possible for me.
I own and work.
I both have my own business and I commute to a business.
So the 2 ways to do that is check all that apply, or use words like my primary work or something like that. But it'd be better to check all that apply?
Yeah, I think so.
My intent was that it would be only one, but you have a very good point.
Chuck just pointed out to me, question number 23. People are not gonna know how many kilowatt hours they use in a year. But they will have a vague idea at least of how much they pay monthly for their,
But you notice, on all of them, I put I don't know.
but they may have an idea of what they pay for their utility bill.
Eric and I can back calculate that. with a fair amount of accuracy.
Yes, it's
So if you
not,
say I pay $230 a month, or I pay $50 a month, we'll get pretty close to the kilowatt hour.
The only person I worry about is who's got photovoltaics.
Oh,
That's a different answer than what they pay them.
that's right.
I don't know if that's one person or 100 people in town.
So we got 2 columns, please check off what you use, no, I'm not kidding, within the same question. How many either, kilowatt hours you use or gallons you use, or how much did you spend in the last year?
2 columns.
And if it's electricity, did you get any money back in a year?
See, like the grids on the future pages, I tried to take questions 19 through 23 and do something to create that into one grid kind of thing, and I just couldn't get it together. It ended up being the 5 questions or whatever it is. Is that important? I mean, I put 5 questions on just to figure out how you heat your home. I couldn't figure out how to shorten that down.
Well, yeah.
what would be the intent of question 23? If somebody is off the grid, or if they're supplementing their energy substantially with solar electric, wouldn't your primary concern be how they burden the grid rather than what they're doing personally?
So the cost is really what matters.
I would think.
I see what you're saying, yeah. Yeah. That's a very good point. So maybe just put in the cost, and if they put 0, then like you say, no burden on the grid because they have everything from. What about the guy that runs a generator? There is a cost.
Yeah, the fuel. There's a few like that.
Are there some people out there running
Yeah.
generators?
Yeah.
There are a couple guys in Chester.
Really not
running,
just
but-
backup and as a primary source?
Primary.
I have a cousin in Chester, that's all he does is run a generator, nothing else. Yeah,
Be his neighbor.
he's so
Well, no,
far
there's
out,
no neighbor.
that's why he has to run the generator, they can't run
I can hear
it.
mine all the way across the valley,
Yeah.
Sorry, I digress. Okay.
And maybe we're parsing it too little, we're trying to get a picture, we're not trying to get such accurate data that we're down to the dollar here, whatever. To me, I kept thinking about trends and big picture kinds of stuff, not, well, do we have 37 people or 38 people burning wood this year?
Well, that's an interesting point then about the solar panels. Can we add on a little subcategory under there after, what heating sources do you use?
Which page you on, what number?
Well, number 16, or do you plan on adding any of these in the next, 2 to 5 years? You know what I mean? Like, if we ask what they're doing right now, it doesn't tell us, oh, they've been saving up for solar and they think that's a thing, or oh, they're planning on doing wind.
And again, kind of a 2-column approach, one question with, what do you have now, what do you think you'll have 5 to 10 years from now kind of approach?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Are there questions you don't want in here as you look through this? I mean, is it important to know how many miles they drive? Is it important to know how important when they pump their cesspool? Remember, there's a bunch of questions underwater that I cut out.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions in that bank of questions about water.
Why do we care when somebody pumped out their septic system if they're way out in the middle of nowhere?
I don't know, that's a good question. What do we want to know from people about water and wastewater? We've talked about it, but without looking at my list, just off the top of your head, this is what I want to know from, is it different from the village people or the people out in the woods? Sorry.
That's fair. I think really what we're asking for is what's your vision of the town, not like where are you now so much, but is where do you see the town in 5 to 10 years? What can we do for economic development for the town? What can we do to support you staying in town?
And this set of questions was to get a better profile of who the town is. But again,
But you point out there's other data, there's other people getting that data.
yeah.
I think we're more interested in what do people want?
So on the data side, radical is you don't ask any of those questions. That would be,
Right.
Honestly,
what are we gonna do with that information?
I know in energy, we wanna push the needle towards renewable.
Sure, but asking them what they're doing now isn't gonna do that for us, right? And somebody's got data on that, we saw some of it, I'm pretty sure, somewhere along the line. Remember when we were looking at the map of who had solar, and I'm like, oh, I'm not on there, but almost everybody else was on there who had solar.
well then without a vote, but a consensus at least, you got 5-10 minutes very quickly. Number 4, do you want to ask that or not? I mean, go with some of these I'd like to not get rid of, but maybe you don't want any of them. I get,
I think we do wanna know who said what, to be able to match them up, not by name, but by like, oh, all second homeowners are planning on having solar but.
versus
people.
business owners
Right.
versus full-time residents.
Right. But I think we wanna know, what are you planning to do to address climate change?
So 5 would go along with 4 that we'd want to know that? Or not?
Do we really care?
I don't know.
Well, is it something on the order of 30 to 40% second homes in Grafton?
I've heard numbers around
Yeah.
as high as 50, but I don't know.
I think the population goes from 600 to 1,400, doesn't it?
Really?
That's my memory.
I don't know.
Currently, I don't know.
But again, I think there's people who are tracking that data. I think we wanna go, what's your vision for the town here? Right, isn't that why we're doing this?
It is.
I know it's a small thing, but I really like the fact that you changed question 27 to say, should the town of Grafton invest local tax dollars? I think that was a flub on my part in asking questions like that before, because we would ask, do you want to improve this without worrying about the money? That's just kind of a
that's
detail.
Yeah,
important.
this is really good.
Yeah,
I wouldn't change anything here.
that was perfect.
Yeah, so like section 3 to me makes total sense that we need to know this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Some of these were cut and pasted from others. Others I randomly added stuff, so I don't know
No,
if
I was
there's.
all over it to begin with, but now I'm just going, wait a minute, really what we wanna know is, what do you want?
Vision.
Yeah. So, do we even need section 1 or 2? I mean, are we gonna do anything with the fact that somebody who's under 20 wants something different than somebody who's over 50? I don't know, maybe we are, or second homeowners want something different than primary homeowners, or do we just wanna know, oh, you have some investment in town, so I guess we can still ask them what it is. But really what we wanna know is, well, is section 3.
You do want to tease out the demographics and how they respond. That was quite
The what?
illuminating. Demographics
Yeah.
and how
Yeah,
the young in
yeah.
Rockingham had a very different view of what they wanted to see Rockingham be compared to the
Yeah,
old-time residents.
and I don't object to section 2 being there, it's interesting.
But questions 4 through 8 seem like demographic questions, and then after that, it's a little bit different. They're more lifestyle questions, if you will.
So I'm just saying, why do we care if somebody's got flooding in their basement or pumped their septic tank or had their water tested? I mean, in the village, I get that, that makes sense, and maybe
Yeah.
we're trying to overlap with the,
And that's what I did honestly, was what are the ones on water that the water committee might want I didn't see making any correlation between, your basement floods and you travel 30 miles to work kinds of things. It was more, I was just planning handing it over to you guys and saying, here's some information, I don't know what to do with it.
Well, then you need a question about,
Yeah, because it doesn't ask about the village.
yes, I live in the village of either the village of Grafton, Houghtonville, or Cambridgeport, if you wanna, like, cluster those a little bit.
Do we want to know? Have you guys discussed, because in the beginning, we discussed doing a survey, discussed it all
Right.
since we've kind of said we're going to be doing it anyways, or?
Right, we'd like to be incorporated, if we could, work together with you.
Okay.
And we could respect, keeping it to a minimum. But like, in a separate sheet, each is great. How do you think the community system should be funded, and you give them options?
You're looking at the wastewater question
Yes.
sheet?
Well, what if you just moved all the water questions to another section that says, if you live in this area, this area, this area, please also fill out this part.
That would be simple to do, and almost separate little sections. This is just for you guys in the village kind of thing?
Yeah,
Because then we could ask a lot more questions.
And if you're mobilizing surveyors, then we have that mechanism. When you're in the village, you use survey A, and if you're out townwide, survey B.
Yeah.
I think it is important that you retain the 9 through 23 or whatever questions, because transportation and heating are the two biggest contributors to our greenhouse gases and our energy use in Vermont right now. And they're what people are trying to figure out ways of attacking. So knowing what the parameters of that are is important. Knowing, and that's what those questions will tease out for the most part. I'm not saying that these are perfect questions for that, but
But you want more depth on the energy components.
those two components of energy, the transportation and heating, are ones that we really need to know a lot about.
I'm not gonna disagree with you, but I'm gonna push back using Valerie. Why do we need to know that? Why is that important for us to know?
That drives what we say in the energy chapter and how we're going to attack renewable energy, or however Grafton, if it takes responsibility for it, develops energy sources for itself.
Yeah. We become resources for Efficiency Vermont to say, hey, look, we've got a chronic weakness with, over-reliance on oil or whatever, and we need additional services to have you guys come in with a program. We can attract more attention.
Not disagreeing, I get nervous about the length of this thing.
Yeah.
Because again, those are some questions. I guess, and we're out of time here, what I would like is a couple of things. One is for all you to do the survey as it stands. I mean, obviously part of that will be judging as you do it, but be the person and do that. Two, if the wastewater committee, are you gonna meet between now and our February meeting? You don't know. I'm wondering if there's any way you guys can review that list of water questions I just gave you and come back and say, here are the 6 that we care about, or even if you come back and say, we need all 35 of them, then we know where you're at least.
Okay.
All right. And then for everybody to review with an eye of being productive, the survey I gave you, as well as the 3 sheets of other questions, so that you can come back and say, Dave, you need to have these 4 challenge. Why did you bother putting this in as we did tonight? And then we start adding and subtracting until we get it where we want. Thoughts on that? And my homework will be to start discussions about having in April a forum on land use for the community. Date has not been chosen. I'll start with Bennett and those folks and go from there. Anything else?
The municipal planning grant, we got one this year, and sort of the feedback we got is we need to be increasingly ready to show them this is what we want. So this kind of material that we've produced, if we send it in the fall and say, these are the questions we're gonna ask, we've developed it, it's approved, at the planning commission level, all we need is funding from you all to administer the survey. It's gonna hit all of their check marks for getting funds, so it would be highly competitive.
There's a good chance we'll succeed in doing the grant's goals.
And that's how we worked it, we said, as soon as you give us the money, we're ready to go.
Okay. I'll have a long conversation with Mr. Bennett, he likes to talk. We'll go down and have coffee with him and we'll figure something out. I had an agenda here somewhere, but I think we're winding up. There it is. So that's the community survey piece. New business, is there any new business? Next regular meeting is Tuesday, February 11th, 6:30 here. If there's nothing else, entertain a motion to go into executive session. So moved. We are moving to executive session. We'll take 5 so you can shut down your equipment and we'll go from there.